So one of the things that I mean, maybe where we could start is I know you guys are doing some really innovative stuff on Wednesdays, and I just thought that it would just be a really good idea to engage the school district and with their support and their money and their dollars to help us in sort of getting the message out, not just to the community, but using the school through the school to the community. Because if when you think about it, the community is attached to the school. There are students there that are connected to families that living in this community. So let's maybe partner in a way that makes sense to have a continual conversation with our community. I thought that that was one of the sort of the, well, I know that that's one of the responsibilities of the RAC co-chair. I haven't spoken or met Colonel Kelly yet. We're due to have a conversation, but I was hoping that you can talk and share some ideas about how we can better engage the community in an intentional and purposeful way. And I wanted to try to get the colonel's sort of um, imperator to help us sort of with this issue because
Mhm.
I show up, they might like laugh me out out of the building. He shows up, the school district and others might want to listen or take a second thought. So
I think that's actually really smart because I'll tell you, the school district in past efforts has been incredibly resistant to
Yeah.
doing anything.
yeah,
I'm not talking about individual teachers.
yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
different. I'm
Well,
talking
I'm
the school district, and I'm saying like resistant to my councilwoman, to Karen Mejia, like resistant to elected officials.
Yeah. So to that end, Deborah, did you guys specifically talk about the rack stuff, or were you talking about other issues? Because I know
That had to do with the water, with
it did.
letting parents know, and again, your idea, like let's use, let's partner and let parents know that there's a problem with the water, and let's talk about it. And just very, very, this is at the beginning. This is very was very, very difficult at the beginning.
And
Well,
so
I think, and also just as a heads up, this was to be more like a end year cap and intro to you, Ed. We're taping it so we can mash stuff together for like an end of the year highlights for
okay, all
Newburgh
right.
Clean
So
Water. But on what you were saying, and Deb, I think a lot of that had to do, and I think we've had it in other discussions. One of the reasons I think the school was very hesitant is because right before the water issue was announced, they had actually sent out letters to families because they were dealing with the lead water issue in all the schools, and they were collaborating with the Department of Health. And so as a parent to a school students, they sent out letters in like that April to announce that all water was either with a filter or any places that they couldn't detect where the lead was coming from, they cut off the lines to the water being sourced. So like you have water fountains that don't work, and alternate areas put in where the water would no longer test with lead. And so I think they backed up because they didn't want any, I want to think liability, honestly, to have parents come and say, hey, wait a minute, now there's PFAS in the water and my kids go to your school. And
Absolutely, that's what I
so
was told.
yeah, and so I
No,
mean, but even like my girls go to Horizons, they're part of the IB program, they're part of the Unlimited program. I've spoken to Nicole's teacher just last week, and she's receptive to trying to do something in class. But she's new to the school, so I don't want to make her vulnerable because maybe that's something that has to go to the principal. I reached out to him last spring to try to put a curriculum together so that they could do something now. He never even responded. So I don't know what the deal is really with, because they have Scenic Hudson come in. I know they have representatives from Riverkeeper do specific classroom presentations. Um, and so we are in some ways, I mean, we're not as established, but we are in that realm. We could educate without being political or anything.
yeah, I
I
mean,
understand. I'm just really responding to Ed's idea. I'm just saying that, Ed, you're not the first person to have this idea, and just wanting you to know a little bit of the history. Now, that should not deter you.
well,
Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I
and
think
Anthony Grice is a teacher.
yeah, and Ramona Burton is on on our committee, right?
Mhm.
As a school board member. So
Yes.
um Yeah, so I think I don't know what the approaches were before, but certainly um, we can uh, uh, we can get with Ramona and sort of get the alignment right, because there's no way that we should not be speaking about this with one of the major institutions, employers in our community, um, and with the major connection to community. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you guys is there's a new grant. It's called Family and Community Engagement. The
Mm.
district wanted in the past, and it just came out. The proposal is due in February. But what is family and community engagement? But engaging families and communities around critical issues involving their children, academic performance, and their health and welfare, social emotional health and welfare. So I, I think that there are ways for us to have this conversation in a way that makes sense for everybody. The other thing I wanted to just run by you guys was in my work around the state and the country, what I've seen communities do to in a real positive way is I've attended in both Peekskill and in North Carolina. These communities had dual board meetings, and what they did was the school board meeting and the city council would meet quarterly because they were dealing with joint issues. And so one of the issues that I would recommend or try to get them to talk about, and I've spoken to Phil Howard, who's I think the vice president of the school board, and Mayor Harvey about this concept, and so they both agree that it's helpful, right? So there are issues that the school district deals with in dealing with families, but there's also issues that the city council deal with because they're dealing with those same families. And some issues are so germane and general that they impact both systems and structures. So it really would make sense for us to sort of have this conversation. And one of the things that I was thinking, and I'm just talking to you guys, is to sort of run that by and have as a lead of that the water issue, right? So there may be some joint issues beyond water, right? But certainly the water issue is a joint issue that both impacts the school district and the city council. And so we have representatives on our committee from both. And so that's another way of us sort of getting above the edge. And again, when we talk to Colonel Kelly, if he co-signs this and agrees that this might be a good way for us to proceed, he might be able to do things that we couldn't do for ourselves in talking to people, if that makes sense.
I think it's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Um, so I wanted to just go through. I'm looking at the purpose, mission, goals, and definitions, and what we're supposed to be doing. And you correct me where I go wrong, right? So the whole purpose of this is for the community to be engaged in this conversation around the issues of PFAS in the water that is infiltrating our water system and impacting our community. And we want to be able to have this committee to have this communication that both flows upstream and downstream about the needs, interests, and concerns of our community, and to inform our community of steps that are being taken to remediate and to make our water as clean as possible. Is that like did I miss anything or
Are you asking in regards to the RAC or in regards to Newburgh Clean Waters?
in regards to the RAC?
Well, it's advisory.
Right.
Well,
But as part of its advisory in part of its advisory capacity, isn't it to communicate and promote awareness and understanding about the issues of you know the regulatory issues and the environmental issues and restorative process?
I think the bottom line is that the DOD ANG is supposed to come up with a plan to clean up their mess. And this is for community input on cleaning up the mess. So I think, number one, what is the mess? Is it just PFAS? Is it more than that? Number two, How are you going to clean it up? When are you going to clean it up? How much is it going to cost? Who's going to pay for it?
And will your cleanup also impact other aspects of things? By remediating, what do you do with the PFAS once it's been collected? And we're, yeah.
Yeah.
I think overall the RAC's goal is to just maintain and hold accountable those responsible for the contamination, and oversee and give advice and hopefully prevent, a half cleanup or whatever. But it's to ensure that our community gets what it needs in terms of that remediation and protections, and maybe also for future use of, maybe preventing those chemicals from being even used. But it's limited, but
Right.
I think
So
I think we're challenging what they assumed we would consider our role.
Totally. And
Yeah.
is Chuck coming on? Because he'll be able to speak really directly.
Yeah, and I actually emailed him like, I hope you're coming. I haven't seen him.
um
Um,
so could I share my screen with you real quick?
sure. Just Ed, Deborah has to leave a hard stop, right, Deborah, at 3:30. She's got a meeting. So I
Oh,
want to make sure that
okay. So Deborah, so because you have that hard stop, is there anything that you wanted to share or suggest or talk about? I know this was like sort of an introductory call, but we can hit the ground running. We're all old friends now. So is there anything that you like wanted me to know, or that I needed to know, or that I should be aware of, or anything that you?
Honestly, I think Chuck is really the person who's going to be able to tell you those things. I
Okay.
think the purpose of this call was because, we do have these Wednesdays, these monthly water sessions.
Uh-huh.
And the next one, we obviously want to keep people aware and raise awareness of the fact that we have a problem, that people are working on fixing it, that there is a RAC that's working with the DoD. So Jen, can you just say again what
yeah,
the
I
agenda is
believe
today?
Mary had mentioned it last week when you guys had met in regards to the RAC. It was the meeting for you, Mary, and Chuck.
Yes.
She mentioned that that we were going to reach out to try to introduce you to the community, as you're stepping into the role as the chair, taking Chuck's place. And so there was just going to be sort of an introduction and discussion about where we are with the RAC right now, what you see for the future, what successes we had for this year, and what you see going forward into 2021. If you have any goals, vision for like the ultimate vision for our watershed and what would come from it. This wasn't really like a planning session for the RAC or anything.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah, this was more to be an intro for you as our incoming chair. Also because Chuck's been the face and voice in the DoD black void of their taping. Oh, there he is. So it's just kind of like an overall, um, end of the year highlight, and then looking into the future. Hey,
Okay.
Chuck.
Hi, sorry.
No,
I'm at work.
are
I'm
you?
trying to squeeze it in here.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Ed got us on our toes because he's all ready to talk meat and
Okay.
potatoes. So
Yeah.
I was just explaining again, because I know Mary went over a little bit with you last week what my intention was in reaching out to you guys. But what we'd like to do is just have a kind of an end of the year highlights, and also sort of introducing Ed as the new co-chair, and Chuck, having him replace you. We'll miss you in that role. But and then maybe more on your side, Chuck, talking about what you feel we've accomplished this year, goals that we have, and that might be discussions with you and Ed that have taken place, and the vision for the watershed moving forward, looking at not only 2021, but the future. And then I would also like to add, like, maybe what your public ask is. What are you asking of people who are going to be watching this? And mind you, I'm going to be editing down and everything. But, what what role do you see the rest of the greater community in this? And Ed made a good discussion earlier in regards to he would like to see the school district involved and maybe other entities, but whether it's individual or a collective. And then I asked Deborah to join us because, you know, she's with us. She's our head steering person, and anything that could bounce off as we discussed would be great. So I'm not very good at hosting emceeing because this is very weird. It's my first time doing this kind of thing. So
I think you're doing great. I
okay.
like the notion of the end of year highlights, and I think it would be really helpful. And I can work with Chuck if that's the way you want to do it, Chuck, to talk about sort of your highlights, Chuck, or your work and how you've led it and how you're going to be passing the baton, and we can talk about some near-term objectives, because I don't want to change the trajectory of where you guys have gone, just to add to it. So maybe that's the way we can do it, Jennifer, that you as you start to pull together the highlights, Chuck can share and we can share sort of where we've been, sort of a retrospective, historical, and also prospective about where we want to go and take this.
Okay, sounds good. How do we, Deborah, you're more in tune to this. How do we make it so that, because it's recording, who is it recording?
It's recording all of us.
And what's being shared, or?
Yeah, it's so the big thing that will be seen is what's on the shared screen right now. So if you want it to be
Yeah, can we
talking
take that
head,
away?
then we need to ask Ed to
Okay.
stop sharing his screen so we can, there we go.
Okay, so it's all heads now, like the Brady Bunch. So I'll just do a quick intro, and or I don't know if you want to do it, Deborah, because people are going to get tired of me. I don't know.
I don't think anybody's going to get tired of you. I think you're pretty terrific.
Okay.
And I have to say, I just want to say I have to jump off in a second. So
Okay.
I just want to say that, Chuck, I'm so grateful to you, and I think you've done such a stellar job, and I'm so like thrilled, Ed, because I didn't know who you were. I haven't met you before, and you're clearly like just so intelligent and had such great ideas, and like it's a good person replacing Chuck, and I can't tell you what a relief that is. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. That's
Thank you.
wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, and you guys will recall I nominated Ed last year to be the chairman.
Well, now I see why.
Maybe you didn't remember that, but yeah, I
5
did.
minutes,
And
you know?
his class schedule, his teaching schedule prohibited it because I knew he would be a dynamic leader for us. The role I took was basically to try to get the operating procedures going, come to some kind of an understanding with the Air National Guard team about what we were going to be allowed to do, push them a little bit here and there to see where we could get to, such as sharing of the preliminary documents, preliminary draft studies with others besides just the nominal members of the team, to bring in some of the scientists that we have on our committees and so on into it, and took a lot of pushing, and only having four meetings a year makes this really tough to try to make progress. I mean, we had a lot of conversations and some background, but they were mostly phone conversations, and you can't accomplish quite as much that way. I find that Zoom is a better way to do that because you can kind of see where people are pushing back or not pushing back. So getting that information so we could spread it a little bit wider, understanding the role of our community organization participants, such as River Keeper and Newburgh Clean Water Project and everybody else. What role could they play, and how far within that group could we share documents? So now we've at least got 3 people in each group that have access to the documents. Those were all push things that we had to get to. So I think I took, and again, it seemed 4 meetings, it just doesn't seem like enough, but it took the year to get to some sort of an understanding with those folks as to what we could and couldn't do, or what they were going to allow us to do. I'm still not happy with it. I still think that the team, Heather Pfeiffer and company, are pushing an Air National Guard agenda instead of a community agenda. Whereas I think the other group, the CBI, who was it?
Oh, the ones in New Hampshire.
Yeah, in New Hampshire. I've got them on my phone.
It's more of a collaborative process. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a collaborative process, and that's that we're missing here. And I'm not saying that that Heather and company aren't capable of doing it. I'm saying I think they've been pushed by the Air National Guard to not do it. And you know, the other group had the advantage of being early on in the whole discovery process about PFASs, and the results. And so they were in 3 years, were able to get a full study done and action items accomplished in terms of cleaning up. I think now they recognize that there's hundreds of sites and it's going to cost them bazillions of dollars to get it cleaned up. And they're dragging their feet for just that reason, because there isn't that much money. And as taxpayers, we all have to recognize that too, because that money that they're talking about is our money, you know, but it's also our water. And I think that was one of the other things that we did get to was finding out that there is actually a review, a priority process for cleanups and studies, which who knew? But we finally got to that point where they said, well, there is a priority process. And then we got to the point of saying, because we're on New York Aqueduct water and we've got a filter in place, they're not going to hold that against us in terms of the priority process. The priority is for areas that don't have any recourse. So we've got recourse, and I was really worried that they were going to bump us off down on the priority list because of that. But they say no. I'd sure like to see this said priority list, but I don't think that's something they're sharing publicly anywhere. So those were a couple of things. I think, yeah, getting access to the stuff and then getting the procedures. I mean, we went around every word of those procedures, the operating procedures, to try and push the envelope. And I can't say enough about Mary, what a great help she was on this. And NCWA, Newburgh Clean Water, NCWP. Got too many acronyms. So for asking the right questions, you know, and you need to have a little bit of both. You have to play good cop, bad cop, or angel on one shoulder, devil on the other shoulder with those folks. So you do have to have that group or person pushing as well. And I think getting the operating procedures done, finalized, in agreement, because there was a lot of things that we had to negotiate. I'm trying to, you know, I have to go back to my notes to see what just which ones they were, but there was just pushback on every line almost in terms of the procedures, and they in the end they changed them, but we had to look through them carefully and really understand everything that they were saying and push as hard as we can to finally get Colonel Kelly actually signed off on it just last week. So we all got signed off on it finally.
Yeah.
But they are the accepted procedures. Now, it doesn't mean we have to stay with them, or they don't have to stay with them, because there was an out clause in those procedures as well, that anytime they want to stop, they can stop, you know. But that's really what we spent the first year doing and starting to push. And I personally was getting very anxious that they hadn't done any more. You know, from what we learned at the third meeting, they'd recognized that their filter system on Rec Pond wasn't working. It was clogging up. They said to us in the interim, the last 3 months, that they were going to change it. So we walk into the meeting in December, and they tell us that they have that they built a new filter system. But we didn't know that. I mean, I came in getting ready to really scream at them for a filter system, and then they're presenting the new filter system. Why didn't they just tell us ahead of time, or tell us that they were doing it? So there's that kind of communication thing that's lacking there. I just think, and it's because we don't have ongoing communications with anybody but Heather during the course of the in-between periods, the interim periods, we don't know this was happening. So I think the fact that they did it would have made me a lot happier. I wish they had done it in the first half of the year and not the last half of the year, actually between the third and the fourth quarter, to get that new filtration system in there. And I'd like to know more about it. I mean, they presented it to us. We didn't even know what questions to ask at that point because we didn't know what it was they'd done. So there's kind of the brief summary of what we did do and what we didn't do. And I think what we have to do is find a way to communicate more closely between our two groups. And I still think, we want to be collaborative and not adversarial. And I think that's what I was busy building was that collaborative process. And now it might be time for a little more adversarial process. Be the perfect person to do that. So,
I gotta jump. I'm so sorry. And
okay,
I just want to make
thank
sure
you.
that I don't end the meeting because usually it says leave and I'm seeing it says end.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I'm
That's how you
not the
do it.
host, but I don't see that. Jen, are you the host?
Mary said, I see you as the cloud with the cloud next to you. Is there a way to, let me see.
Deborah is the host.
And usually there's a way for for a host to let somebody else be the host, but I'm just not seeing it.
Right, there is. I don't do it enough either to
Sorry,
remember.
guys. Sorry to break the flow here.
No, it's good.
Okay.
Does that mean that the meeting would end completely? Because
Yeah.
Mary said
Yeah.
Leave, the meeting will end. Because usually if it's a participant, it'll just say leave and then you can leave. But on my screen, it says end. And I also see that I have some other features, but you know.
Yeah.
Are you able to designate me?
That's what I've been looking for. And I'm just not seeing how I can do that. I don't see any options for doing that.
I am not apt in this at all.
Yeah.
And Mary said she was setting it
Deborah,
up.
if you click on those three dots by your name, is there functionality there?
You know what? No, and usually that's where it is. But you know what? I think
That's where I thought it was too.
hold on a second. Maybe it is here.
More.
I wonder if I click on Jen. Let's see. No, that gives me a chat. I wonder if I can make Jen the host. I figured it out. Okay, Jen, I'm about to be the host. You have to kind of go into the chat. Change
very much. I am host now.
Oh, the
Okay.
chat. That's right.
Hey,
Thank you so much, Deborah.
Take care, Deborah.
thank you all. I'm sorry I have to leave.
Thank you, Deborah. It's good to see you.
Great. You too.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you too.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
So, okay. All right. So, but Chuck, I want to say that that's a testament to the work that you've put in. And more importantly, I think one of the other successes here or the accomplishments is that I really feel that the DoD especially underestimates our role and what we have as expectations for them. And that we are persistent in this matter, that we weren't going, and I mean, it's already been 4 years,
Yeah.
we're going on 5 come next May. And I think for, maybe some communities, they are tired and slowly, lessen in numbers and the voice, but I think they're starting to get a real understanding of our community and understand that we're not going to let up or dwindle, so to speak. And I think by you sitting in that chair in the beginning and having the expectations so high and holding them accountable to, look, we're going to read word for word and edit as we feel fit to make it more appropriate to what our community needs, I think is a lot. And you should pat yourself on the back for that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's also, that the community was behind us.
Mm.
The fact that we were able to get almost 100 people on every Zoom meeting call. Now they had some people there too. I'm counting their people as well as ours. But I think we had outsiders coming in. It wasn't just the 15 participants. There were a lot of outsiders came in. And that's a testament to the community, number one. I also think that we perhaps could, I hate to use the word capitalize, but utilize the fact that we are an environmental justice community, and we've not really played that hand. And I think that would go a long way into moving us up on the priority list. And that's going to be the real challenge. Is how do we get up on that priority list to actually get some, I mean, I want to see Washington Lake cleaned up. I don't want to just pump water out of there. I want to see the lake cleaned up so we can have a reliable source. But, you know, again, that's going to go out into the towns. The towns are starting to recognize that there's a problem that they caused. I mean, literally by poor zoning. And you know, it goes all the way back. I don't sound like a broken record, but it goes all the way back to the Thruway Authority ramming a thruway through our wetlands that fed our lake. And then they opened it up. The thruways there, the exit from Thruway in 84 is there. The trucks are there. The visitors are there. The hotels. I mean, whoever thought we'd have 19 hotels or however many there are stacked up on Route 17K 300 corridor and more in the works. I mean, build one where the steakhouse is there by the diner. I think the diner wanted to go to a hotel too.
Steakenstein?
Yeah, Steakenstein. So there's 3 more potential hotels going in there right across from Washington Lake.
Yeah.
We just, you know, and we can't afford to buy up all these properties, especially with their commercial ratings for them. So how do we get to that? How do we get to that big picture stuff? I think that's where I'm kind of leaping off and saying, what do we do next? How do we convince the towns of Newburgh and town of New Windsor that now have poisoned wells themselves? They're going to start to see we maybe need to, how to calculate, if we got to at least stop it continuing or going further, but how can we remediate what has already happened? I mean, we didn't even find out about the Crystal Run going in there until they were practically had backhoes in the ground, you know?
Yeah, and refused to listen to our own city officials when they went to their zoning meetings.
Yep.
So, well, I mean, I think one thing that's interesting that's been brought to the table also is, I mean, with COVID-19, there are now studies coming out where communities that are affected with PFAS are affected more substantially with COVID-19. They're talking also about the issue of the vaccine working or not working for those who are environmentally impacted. So it's more of a discussion than just, you know, which is the most vital one, which is the water, getting the water remediated and everything, but the after effects that are still echoing. Ed.
Yes. Well, so what's interesting about what Chuck said, obviously he downplayed all of the great work that he did, right, and is doing. But one of the things that I would like to just maybe make some connection to, so he was building a plane while he was flying it. And while he only alluded to certain things that he accomplished, what he also did was while he was building it, he also left some breadcrumbs for me, right? So what we talked about when Mary and I talked was about sort of near-term and long-term objectives. All I really did was pick up on the cues that he had left behind. So things like understanding the science, right? So while it's important to get those procedures done, the work that he had left, those breadcrumbs were, we really need to understand the science, and we really, and so he was able to get folks on our team that understood the science, and obviously you and your group and groups like that really are in this space that can help us demystify it, right? And but the other thing that I think, what I'd like to try to take what he's done and now sort of springboard it forward is, now we need to be able to have conversations with the community so that they understand the science, and that so they can actively communicate and participate in the process of this thing. So when Chuck talks about what he was just talking about, which is the towns now getting more involved, well, people don't get involved unless it's relevant to them, if it meets a need, interest, or concern that they have. And so one of the tasks that I think we now have to take up is really making it relevant, and so that people understand this stuff. So the understanding the science piece, the health studies piece, the community engagement piece, which is where we can get the schools involved and where we can do and build on your Water Wednesdays and how we might be able to incorporate that into the schools, essay writing, opportunities to incorporate this into science and health classes, those types of things. And then, the watershed tours, the urgency around cleanup. Chuck talks about the prioritizing of Newburgh. Like, I didn't know that, right? So now we know that that's an issue that we need to keep front of mind as we start to engage with these systems. Make sure Newburgh is prioritized. He also alluded to the fact that we need to protect our source of water, right? These are things that, while they weren't at the forefront, now that we know them, we need to make sure that our constituents know, that the community knows, and what that means. Like, what does it mean to prioritize the water and protect our source of water? Like, we have to have a translator to do that. And so like maybe one of those Water Wednesdays could be about. I'm sure you've already done a lot of this thinking, but this is where I'm coming from. I want to try to build on and take and follow those breadcrumbs that Chuck and team laid out to take it to the next level. And I just took a note while he was talking about it. We want to get a new facilitator too, right? And that's a real thing. And so, um, I'm understanding why we want to get a new facilitator, because what we're trying to accomplish requires that we have someone that's more in tune. Because Chuck mentioned, right? He said they put a new filter system in. We raised it as an issue. They put a new filter system in. A good facilitator would have facilitated that conversation better, right? And hey guys, we addressed some of the issues that you had. And so what that says to me is, when I'm talking to Colonel Kelly, these are the types of things I can bring up, that I can say, hey, moving forward, to have really effective communication, these are some of the things that we need to look at. These are some of the priorities that we want to raise. Um, I'm going to be very gentle about the new facilitator part. I'm just going to, you can't just tell people to fire people. You get my point though, right? And so, um, one of the other things that Chuck and Mary shared with me was that we need to present at every meeting. And the reason why we need to present at every meeting is because we want our voice on record, right? And what happens if you don't present, you wind up going through, a snooze fest where they're just giving you a bunch of information, some of which you can digest, some of which you can't digest. But at least if we can get to the place when we're communicating, almost to the point where, well, this is what I heard you say last meeting. And this is what we shared with the community. And by the way, this is what the community believes we should address that issue. So now we have this sort of on the record dialogue about what we want, what the community wants, how we actually get there, and they're responding to us. Right now, this is sort of like, you know, two trains passing in the night. We're not having any really deep conversations about it. The other thing that they did was they shared with me. Mary did an amazing job of creating a contact sheet, because one of the things that I always like to do is I like to have an asset map and a needs assessment and a contact sheet of all of the stakeholders. So this is like my playbook. So Mary has done a Google spreadsheet. Um, she also alerted me about some NFA West environmental science teachers that are on board. And so again, maybe having the conversations the right way. Um, then we talked about creating sort of this RAC resource guide and clearinghouse, something that would house definitions, an organizational chart, frequently asked questions, timelines, the treatment schedules, deliverables, and expectations. And then finally, we talked about communication. We talked about social media, website, and meetings beyond the RAC meeting, right? So we know that we have that quarterly RAC meeting, but that quarterly RAC meeting doesn't prevent us from having more, RAC meetings that we facilitate, that we engage the community in. And those meetings can be really targeted. Like, we can go and meet with the school board, and we can go and meet with community stakeholders, and we can go and meet with city council so that we can be on the same page and we can hear people, really hear people, because now we can have a conversation because we've given them some, resource guide and information. I remember early on, and Chuck will know to remember this, was that my big thing was they were throwing out these acronyms like everybody knew what they were talking about. And like, speak to me like, remember that old Denzel Washington movie, Philadelphia? Speak to me like I'm a sixth grader, right? Talk to me like I don't know anything so that I can understand it, so I can make informed decisions. So, I mean, to that end, I know you guys do it, and I know that there's going to have to be some level of transition. And so I want to talk about, what does our social media look like? What does our website look like? I mean, I know that you're currently maintaining it. And again, I want to be cognizant of all of that stuff. Like, how do we move forward? Because at some point, you're going to get tired of me and us. So we want to try to figure out, the way forward. So I think what I've tried to do with what we just talked about was to transition from what Chuck did, all of the issues that were raised, all of the bright line points that he made, and to transition into how we move from where we are to where we are going. And so the last thing I'll say is this: my understanding of the RAC goals: promote awareness and understanding, review and comment on technical documents, exchange research from global sources, that means from every place, serve as a community liaison, providing information from the RAC meetings to the community and information from the community to the RAC meetings. That's that presenting at every meeting piece I think we need to do. Serve as a governmental, share ideas about ways to expeditiously and thoroughly, comprehensively complete the restoration efforts. This is where I really I want to take Chuck's lead, and I'm going to go back to the situation he mentioned where we were talking about the filter system. So we identified the issue, and this is a way we were going to thoroughly and comprehensively expedite the restoration efforts. Then we say something, and then they just do it, but they don't come back to us and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. Thank you for that. Or this is the direction we're going to go in. It's like, they just did it. And then they presented it to us. So, sharing ideas, provide positive solution focused input, uh, respond to the work earnestly to address concerns raised by RAC members, provide guidance for assistance in navigating various governmental agencies, receive and relate the goals of the community through meetings, polls, surveys, etc. So what I really want to do, Jennifer, as well, is take all of the goals, the RAC goals that were in that we worked so hard, Chuck worked so hard to get the operating procedures signed off on, and use that as, because that should just be our jump off point. We have to bring this to life in our engagement. So I want to engage Colonel Kelly just like that. I want to say, hey, Colonel, these are our goals. And now the question is how do we achieve them together? And so then we can talk, he and I, about how we actually do that. And my responsibility is then to get from the RAC member team leadership how we actually do that as well. And so that's where I am with it. We called it near-term objectives and long-term objectives. That's the way we were trying to proceed with it, because that's exactly what the framework that Chuck and team led for gave to us. They were focused on getting the operating procedures done, the near-term objective, making sure that they were building the plane as they were flying it, looking at what's being done, what's been done, checking those things, getting scientists to help us understand it and grapple with it, making recommendations. And so now we want to build on that, now that we have the procedures, but we want to be really intentional and purposeful, because what's happening, we feel, is there's not effective communication. And so I think if I had a word for the day and for the next, so our main near-term goal is collaboration, communication, and getting at the root cause of the issue. I'm done. I'm sorry.
So I'm just going to put out there, because we had this it's a lot longer than I thought, but it's all good. What would be a public ask that you have at this point, Chuck and Ed? Like going into 2021, this is going to be, we're going to edit this down so that people can kind of listen in on our conversation. But what's something that you would ask either as individuals or, community groups, collectives? What are you asking of us moving forward with the RAC and just the watershed literacy and all of that?
So I'm going to cycle around a little bit to that. Every month, several weeks before the meeting, or before every quarterly meeting, they ask us what we want to know. And we always put it out to the RAC members, and we get almost no response, unfortunately. What do you want to know? What do you want to know about? We don't understand the science. Do we want somebody, and they've offered to do this, do we want somebody to actually dive into how long and short chains are constructed and all that stuff, or how this study that they're doing affects their bottom line, affects what's going to happen? But we don't know the questions to ask all the time. And I think many of our members don't. And I don't want to, downgrade any of our members, but they're not engaged except for a couple days before each meeting. And they go back and read everything and try to get on it. So how do we get people engaged on a longer term? And I think that goes back to some of your educational things. For instance, my ask since the first meeting has been a tour of the base, so I know what the hell they're talking about. So I know where these things are. Where are all these 7 pipes, that they talk about? And I understand there's security issues. I understand COVID. Colonel Kelly, it's now Colonel Cook, I believe, is the new RAC chairman for the Air National Guard. It's Colonel Cook now. But I understood Colonel Kelly hadn't left the base in like 6 months. He wasn't allowed to leave and then come back. So that, it made it impossible for us to have a tour. I even asked for a Zoom tour, but I think they were concerned that that might get hacked, that somebody could steal state secrets. These planes are in and out of here a lot. I don't know what the hell they're doing, but I'm glad they're doing it, whatever it is. I think they're doing the right thing, I hope. But, some days we hear these planes going off in formations. And I just, I said, God, is the bomb going to drop? I don't know. So I think there's definitely security issues involved there. But if I understood, I never even really got a good grip on where the wreck pond was. I mean, I can look at it on a USGS map, but it'd be nice to have boots on the ground and actually see it. One of the best things that we ever did was the Newburgh Clean Water Project watershed bus tours. I took that opened my eyes like crazy. I mean, I learned so much from that. And if we could replicate that, even if it was a video replication of that, and that really leads me to Chris Cortunis. Her husband, John, runs Commodore Chocolate. And Chris is a science teacher at the high school. And I had a long talk with her yesterday when I was buying chocolates. And I've never really talked to her that much. I talked to John all the time, but so it turned out she was teaching 2 AP classes in environmental education, plus earth science and biology. So 2 more classes there, but 2 AP classes in environmental ed. And I steered her towards the watershed, and she like lit up. She asked me if I'd talked to Peter Smith. I said, yeah, he's my next door neighbor. We talk daily almost, and so she was so thrilled. So she might be a resource person that I had not even thought about until yesterday. So who are those other resource people that are out there? I mean, she's an educator. She's looking towards retirement. I hope she doesn't, because she's so good for those kids. She's an amazing teacher. There's more people like that out there that we could use as educators that could then help us to educate our population about all this. So that's something that I think we should and could be looking at. I do still want a tour, and every time they tell me they're getting closer to getting us back onto the base, But we stood up at part of the watershed tour up on the hill looking down over the base. And you could really see, and somebody, Marcel was there, and he knew that's that, that's that, that's that. And it helps you to put it into perspective. Now, I remember when after 9/11, all the USGS maps even disappeared. So I understand there's a lot of, issues with security here, but because it's a base, it's an operating base. It's crucial to our nation's security as well. So I don't want to stop that, but I think we need to have a way to educate our public. The Water Wednesdays and the watershed tours, if we could find a way to bring them back. Oh, Joshua Smith right now. I'm going to have to call him back. So, that's, and I have to leave anyway because it's 4 o'clock and I'm going to have to run, but I'd like to stay and I'd like to continue this conversation further with Ed. And now Ed, I know, is making notes on his spreadsheet, on his document there. And I really hope you'll share that with us and take a look at it. So I can take a look at it. I've made some notes. I brought up Chris Cortunis. I brought up the fact that they offered to do trainings for community or for RAC members. And I think we ought to take them up on that. That's the education stuff that's needed. I love the idea of a RAC resource clearinghouse too. That said,
Yeah.
I enjoy your company. I can spend about 2 more hours doing this, I think.
Yeah.
Set up another one.
Okay. And I won't make you late to your meeting. Thank you very much, Chuck.
Thank you, Jen.
And we'll chat soon. I'm going to mash this together, and I might reach out to you individually so I can make it not MTV like, but.
Yeah. So I just to say this, Jennifer, I totally agree with what Chuck said. And when I was sharing with you about sort of the RAC resource guide or the clearinghouse, that was what I really meant. So so sometimes you have to drive action. Like, so what Chuck said really was that we want people to become educated so that they now can become participatory in the process of environmental cleanup, environmental awareness, environmental social justice issues. But we can't do that until we create the definitions, the org chart, the frequently asked questions, the Water Wednesdays, to get people in tune with the action. So so there's a precursor to that, I believe, because again, relevancy is going to be why they are interested in. So, but the answer to your question, I think, is we want to provide the space and place to facilitate conversations. And I'm carrying a lot of this from my work in the fatherhood space. I was the community outreach for the National Responsible Fatherhood Clearinghouse, and that was our role too. We had to raise a level of awareness around the importance of fatherhood. So how do you do that? And there were all sorts of things that we did to do that. I think here we are in a similar place. Some people are really fired up about it, but there are a lot of people that aren't. So what we need to do is to get and raise the level of awareness around this issue. And that's my focus and drive to get it out there. Because once they are aware of it, then we can start doing the things that we need to do.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Gentlemen, I thank you for your time. I'm not going to hold you any longer. I will be in touch later, though. Thank you. And
Thanks for everything,
Jen.
Ed.
All right, take care.
Stay warm.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. Thanks, Ed. Thanks.
Bye.
Now I got to figure out how to turn it off. Okay, I got it.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.